Hi, this is Chris Walker. Imagine this. You just dropped $1,500 on the latest 2026 mini LED flagship. You've been waiting all week. You slice the tape, reach in, and give the panel a firm grip to pull it out. You hear a sound, not a crack, just a tiny, sickening tink. You plug it in, hit power, and instead of a 4K masterpiece, you're greeted by a jagged spiderweb of neon purple lines. Congratulations, you just turned your living room into a graveyard for expensive glass. I see it every single day. People treat these 2026 ultra-slim panels like they're the chunky plastic TVs from 10 years ago, but these things are basically structural potato chips. One wrong pinch, one bad pro tip from a Reddit thread, or one good enough surge protector, and your warranty is effectively a piece of confetti. Today, I'm showing you the 5 essentials that prevent the day one disaster. Before we dive into the hardware traps, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. We don't take a dime from the brands we're about to tear apart, so your support is the only thing keeping these tests independent and honest. Look, I know that feeling. You just spent 2 months of salary on a screen that's thinner than your smartphone, and you want it on the wall now. You want to see those 4,000 nit highlights in those perfect blacks. But here's the cold, hard truth. The 2026 TV market is a minefield of built-in fragility. We're in the era of the structural potato chip. Brands like Samsung, Sony, and LG are competing to see who can make a 55-inch panel the thinnest, but they aren't telling you that they've sacrificed the rigid internal chassis to do it. The reality of the 2026 market is that these TVs are designed to be moved exactly once by a professional team with a suction rig. But you're likely doing this yourself on a Saturday afternoon. The first essential that most people ignore is what I call the unboxing rig. Most people make the mistake of laying the box flat on the floor. Don't do that. When you lay a 55-inch mini LED or OLED box flat, the weight of the glass itself starts to put pressure on the internal layers. These panels are a sandwich of organic material, transistors, and filters. If that sandwich bows even 3 millimeters, you've just created a permanent jail bar effect that you won't see until the first time you watch a hockey game or a bright sky scene.
Here's the insider secret. You keep that box vertical. You use the gravity drop method. Cut the plastic straps, lift the entire outer cardboard sleeve up and over the top, and leave the TV sitting in its bottom foam cradle. This keeps the weight on the frame, not the glass. And for the love of everything holy, do not, I repeat, do not grab the top edge of the screen to pull it out. I've seen more $2,000 panels snapped in the top third because someone used their thumbs as leverage. You grab the bottom corners where the chassis is thickest. If your thumb is touching the actual pixels, you're doing it wrong. Now let's talk about the invisible filter trap. In 2026, almost every high-end 55-inch set comes with a specialized anti-glare coating, like Samsung's Glare Shield or Sony's Blackout 2.0. These aren't just pieces of plastic, they are chemically bonded layers. I've seen dozens of emails this month from people who thought that matte finish was a protective shipping film and tried to peel it off. If you start peeling and you don't see a very obvious green or blue pull tab in the corner, stop. If you force it, you are literally delaminating the optics of the TV. That is a non-warranty repair that costs 80% of the price of the TV. You're basically buying the TV twice because you wanted to peel a sticker that wasn't a sticker. Then we have the mounting myth. Everyone thinks a Visa mount is a Visa mount. Wrong. In 2026, these TVs are so light that manufacturers are using thinner gauge metal for the mounting points. If you use the bolts that came with your Universal 2022 wall mount, they are likely too long. You'll screw them in, feel a bit of resistance, give it one more turn, and pop. You've just driven a steel bolt directly into the power board, or worse, the back of the panel. You need the M6 short calibration kit. It's $10 of insurance. Use the spacers. If that bolt has even a millimeter of play, don't crank it down to make it fit.
And look, I'll be honest with you, the included power cord in the box is almost always a joke. It's a non-shielded 18-gauge wire that's barely long enough to reach the floor.
In 2026, with the way our power grids are fluctuating and the sensitivity of these new AI processing chips like the Alpha 1.0 or the XR Master, a clean power signal isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. If you plug your new TV into a $5 power strip from 2018, you are begging for a board failure within the first year. The day one essential here is a power conditioner with sine wave correction, not just a surge protector. A surge protector is a fuse. A conditioner is a filter. It keeps the voltage steady so your AI processor doesn't have to reboot every time your fridge kicks on. Here's where it gets weird, as I always say. Let's look at the first big product of 2026 that everyone is getting wrong, the LG G6 OLED. It's the gold standard for 55-inch TVs this year, but LG did something clever with the thermal management. They removed the heavy copper heatsink and replaced it with a carbon nanofilm. It's lighter, sure, but it means the TV is incredibly sensitive to airflow. If you flush mount this thing against a wall with zero clearance, you're cooking the organic pixels. Within 6 months, you'll have thermal staining, a yellow tint in the middle of the screen that looks like a coffee stain. The manual says you need 2 inches of clearance. The marketing shows it flush. Believe the manual, not the lifestyle photos. I know what you're thinking. Chris, I just want to watch the game. Why is this so complicated? Because these aren't TVs anymore. They're giant, fragile, high-performance computers that happen to emit light. If you treat it like a 1990s Sony Trinidad, you're going to have a very expensive bad day. I want to hear from you guys. I'm planning the next batch of deep dives for the 2026 lineup. What specific model are you staring at in your shopping cart right now? Are you torn between the new QD-OLEDs or the 5000 nit mini LEDs? Drop the model number in the comments below. I read every single one, and that's how I decide which units we buy for the torture tests. Seriously, tell me what you need to know so I can save you from a $2,000 mistake. I'm about to dive into the Samsung and TCL models, which have their own surprises waiting for you. But before I do, seriously, which specific models are you guys looking at right now? I see the 55-inch market is absolutely exploding this year. Are you looking at the Hisense U9 series or maybe the new Philips Ambilight sets? Drop a comment below and let me know. I build my torture test schedule based on your votes, and I want to make sure the one you're about to buy is the one I'm currently trying to break in the lab. Moving on to the Samsung QN90F. This is the 2026 mini LED champion for most people. Samsung's Vision AI is the big marketing push here. They tell you it intelligently upscales every scene. I ran the data and look, I'll be honest with you, it's essentially a very aggressive Photoshop filter running in real time. It's adding sharpness where there isn't any, creating halo artifacts around people's heads in older 1080p content. The QN90F has a massive issue with black crush. In their quest to beat OLED at its own game, Samsung's local dimming is so aggressive that it's deleting shadow detail. If you're watching a dark horror movie, the guy in the shadows isn't just hard to see, he literally doesn't exist on this screen. The pixels just turn off. To fix this, you have to dive 3 menus deep and disable the Essential Shadow Detail AI, which ironically the TV turns back on every time there's a firmware update. That brings us to essential number 3, the Essential Calibration Bypass. Most people destroy their experience on day 1 by leaving the TV in Store Demo or Standard mode. These modes are designed to look good under the harsh fluorescent lights of a Best Buy, not in your living room. On the QN90F, Standard mode uses 40% more power and runs the backlight at a voltage that accelerates mini LED burn. Yes, it's a thing. If you leave it in the default mode, those blue tinted LEDs will lose 20% of their peak brightness within 18 months. Switch it to filmmaker mode immediately. It feels yellow at first because your eyes are used to the blue light junk food of the default settings, but after 10 minutes, your brain adjusts and you'll finally see the movie the way the director actually graded it. Now, let's look at the value king that everyone's talking about, the TCL QM8 2026. On paper, this thing is a beast. 5,000 zones of local dimming for under $1,000? It sounds like a steal. And for gaming, it kind of is. But here's where the math starts to make sense for why it's cheaper.
TCL is using a lower-grade anti-reflective coating. If you have a lamp behind your couch, the QM8 turns into a mirror. I've seen people try to fix this by using window cleaner on the screen. Do not do this. The chemical coating on the 2026 and Hisense sets is extremely sensitive to ammonia. If you use a standard glass cleaner, you will eat through the polarizing layer in seconds. You'll end up with a permanent cloud in the middle of your screen that looks like a grease stain. Your essential number 4 is a high-density microfiber and distilled water. No chemicals, no screen cleaning kits from the checkout aisle, just a dry, high GSM cloth. If the smudge is stubborn, 1 drop of distilled water on the cloth, not the screen, is all you need. Finally, let's talk about the HDMI trap. 2026 saw the official rollout of HDMI 2.2. This is the new standard that supports 4K at 240 Hz and 8K Pro. But here's the scam. Your old ultra-high-speed cables from 2024 might not cut it anymore. The bandwidths for these 2026 AI processors is so high that older cables cause sparklies, tiny white pixels that flicker on the screen, or random blackouts. Brands won't tell you this because they want you to think the TV is just finicky. It's not the TV, it's the $5 cable you're using to feed a $2,000 signal. You need to look for the Ultra 96 certification. If it doesn't have that holographic QR code on the box, it's a bottleneck. I know what you're thinking. Chris, this is a lot of homework. But look at it this way. You spent weeks researching which TV to buy. Don't spend 5 minutes destroying it because you used the wrong cable, the wrong cleaner, or the wrong settings. We're just getting started. Alright, we've covered the physical setup and the settings traps, but now we're heading into the comparative dead zone. This is the part of the year where everyone gets seduced by the spec sheets of 3 or 4 different models and ends up making a choice based on a feature they'll literally never use. I want to look at the big 3 of the mid to high tier 55-inch market for 2026. The Samsung S95 QD-OLED, the Hisense U8N 2026 revision, and the LG G6 Gallery series. Let's start with the Samsung S95F. This is the 3rd generation of their quantum dot OLED tech. And look, I'll be honest with you, the color is intoxicating. If you're coming from a standard LED TV, it looks like someone took a layer of wax paper off the world. But here's the stuff they don't tell you in the manual. Because Samsung refuses to support Dolby Vision, still, even in 2026, this TV relies entirely on its own AI tone mapping to translate HDR content. When you watch a Dolby Vision master on this set, the TV has to guess how to display the brightness peaks. In 90% of scenes, it's fine, but in that remaining 10%, the high-stakes cinematic moments, it gets weird. I've seen the S95F over-brighten skin tones until people look like they're made of neon just because the AI thought the scene was too dark. It's the invisible hand of Samsung trying to make everything look punchy, even when it's supposed to look moody. If you're a film purist, this is a deal breaker that no YouTube unboxing video is going to mention. Now let's pivot to the dark horse of 2026, the Hisense U8N. For 2 years, Hisense has been the value king, but this year they've gone aggressive. They're using a new high-Z glass that's supposedly more durable. But here's where it gets weird. That glass has a unique refractive index that causes a rainbow smear if you look at it from more than 30 degrees off-center. If you have a wide sectional sofa, the person sitting on the far end is going to see a completely different movie than the person in the middle. The marketing calls it Wide Angle Pro, but my testing shows it's actually worse than last year's model because they prioritized peak brightness over viewing angles. This leads us to essential number 5, the power surge paradox. In 2026, these TVs are so power efficient that they never truly turn off. They stay in a low-power standby AI mode so they can listen for your voice or download updates. This makes them incredibly vulnerable to dirty power. I've seen more 2026 Hisense and Samsung boards fried, not by a lightning strike, but by brownouts, those tiny dips in voltage when your AC kicks on. Most people think a surge protector is enough. It's not. You need a battery backup, UPS, with automatic voltage regulation, AVR. If the power dips, the UPS kicks in for half a second to stabilize the voltage. It's the difference between your TV lasting 3 years and 10. I know what you're thinking. Chris, you're telling me I need a battery for my TV? Yes, because in 2026, the power supplies in these ultra-thin sets have zero fat on them. They are built to the absolute minimum tolerance. One bad power cycle and the handshake between the processor and the panel can get corrupted. Now, let's talk about the LG G6. This is the no-gap wall mount specialist. It's beautiful, it's bright, and it has the best Alpha 12 processor in the business. But here is the insider secret that LG hides in the fine print of the installation guide. The G6 is designed to be mounted on a perfectly flat wall. If your drywall has even a slight wave to it, which 90% of houses do, the rigid no-gap bracket will put torque on the TV's chassis. I've had 3 units come through the lab with dirty screen effect, or DSE, caused entirely by the mounting bracket being screwed too tightly into a non-flat wall. The TV is so thin that the frame actually bends to match the wall's imperfections, pulling the OLED pixels out of alignment. If you see streaks on your new LG G6, don't return it yet. Try loosening the mounting bolts by half a turn. It sounds crazy, but giving the TV room to breathe physically is just as important as giving it room to breathe thermally. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that for $2,000, the TV should just work. And it should. But the reality of 2026 is that we're the beta testers for these ultra-thin designs. Let's look at one more, the Sony A95L carryover/2026 refresh. Sony didn't release a new flagship OLED this year. They just refreshed the A95L with a new OS. It's still arguably the best picture on the planet, but it has a weird quirk that's driving people insane. Sony's new Eco Dashboard 3.0 is turned on by default, and it uses a presence sensor to dim the TV if it doesn't think anyone is in the room. I've had people email me saying their Sony is broken because it keeps dimming during movies. It's not broken, it just thinks you're a piece of furniture because you aren't moving. You have to go into the Pro Labs menu, which isn't even in the main settings, to disable the static recognition feature. Sony does this to hit Energy Star 2026 ratings, but it ruins the experience of watching a long, slow-burn movie like The Batman. Look at those numbers. The marketing nits are almost double the real-world numbers. Why? Because they measure a 1% white window for 1 second. No one watches a 1% white window for 1 second. You watch movies. You watch sports. You need to know what the TV does over 2 hours, not 2 seconds. And that brings us back to the most important point of this entire deep dive. The TV is only 50% of the equation. The other 50% is how you treat it in those first 24 hours. If you feed it bad power, mount it to a crooked wall, or let the AI optimize your picture into oblivion, you've wasted your money. All right, we are in the home stretch. We've talked about the physical fragility, the digital Photoshop filters, and the power grid nightmares. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that 99% of people miss because it's invisible. It's the silent killer of the 2026 flagship, the thermal saturation. You see, as these TVs get thinner, we're talking under 10 millimeters now for some of these 55-inch panels, the heat has nowhere to go. In the old days, a TV was basically a big hollow box of air. Now it's a packed sandwich of glass and silicon. That brings us to essential number 5, the heatsink hack. Now, I'm not telling you to take a screwdriver to your new TV. What I'm telling you is that the lifestyle photos showing these TVs flush mounted against a flat wall with no cables in sight are a literal death sentence for the hardware. If you buy the Samsung S95H, the successor to last year's S95F, you're dealing with a panel that targets 4,000 nits. That is an insane amount of energy being pushed through a QD-OLED layer. If you trap that heat against a piece of drywall, the pixel refresh cycles I mentioned earlier can't do their job. They need the panel to be at room temperature to calibrate the voltage. If the panel stays warm for 3 hours after you turn it off because it's trapped in a heat pocket, the calibration fails. Within a year, you'll have ghosting or panel mismatch, where one half of the screen looks slightly warmer than the other.
The hack? A simple low-profile spacer kit. It adds an inch of breathing room without ruining the look, and it literally doubles the life of your processor. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Chris, just tell me which one to actually buy. Look, I've spent 300 hours in the lab with the 2026 lineup, and the results are complicated. Let's get to the verdict. I've grouped these by the real-world person you actually are, not the person the marketing brochures think you are. The cinema purist, the LG G6, primary RGB tandem 2.0. If you watch movies in a dark room and you care about the director's vision, this is the only 55-inch set that matters in 2026. LG's new tandem tech uses 2 layers of pixels to share the load. It's like having a car with 2 engines. Neither has to work as hard, so they last longer. The reflection handling is world-class. We measured under 0.5% reflectance. But remember our flat wall rule. If your wall isn't perfect, use a shim. The living room warrior, the Sony Bravia 9 RGB mini LED. If your living room has 3 windows and you watch the game at 2 p.m. on a Sunday, do not buy an OLED. I don't care what the salesman says about perfect blacks. In a bright room, the Sony Bravia 9's true RGB mini LED system will eat an OLED for breakfast. It hits 5,000 nits in small highlights. It's the closest thing to the sun in your living room we've ever seen. Just be prepared to disable that eco-present sensor I warned you about, or the TV will think you've died on the couch and dim the lights during the 4th quarter.
The raw color king, the Samsung S95F QD-OLED. This is for the person who wants their TV to look like a futuristic piece of art. The new wireless One Connect box is actually reliable this year, meaning you only have one tiny transparent wire going to the screen. The color volume on this thing is illegal in some states. It's that vibrant. But here's the catch. You must be willing to manually calibrate it. Out of the box, Samsung's Vision AI makes everything look like a Pixar movie. If you want skin tones to look like skin and not orange peels, you're going to spend 20 minutes in the settings menu using our calibration bypass guide. The best value, and it's a tie, is the TCL QM8 versus the Hisense U75QG. If you have $900 and you want a 55-inch TV that feels like a $2,000 set, these are your picks. The Hisense has better color out of the box. The TCL has better gaming features and less input lag. Both of them, however, are the most susceptible to the chemical cleaning trap. If you use Windex on these TVs, you are throwing your money in the trash. Buy the distilled water and the microfiber cloth before the TV even arrives. Now, here is the truth bomb. The TV industry in 2026 is designed for planned obsolescence. These companies don't want your TV to last 10 years. They want it to last 3 years, just long enough for the 8K Pro or the holographic Neural Link sets to come out. They build these sets with thinner glass, smaller heat sinks, and cheaper power boards because they know most people won't notice until the warranty is 3 days expired. But you're different. You've watched this deep dive. You know that the 5 essentials aren't optional. Use the vertical unboxing rig to protect the glass. Use a UPS or power conditioner to protect the brain. Use the calibration bypass to protect the pixels. Use no chemical cleaning to protect the coating, and give it airflow to protect everything else. I'll be honest with you, most people are going to ignore this. They're going to rip the TV out of the box, plug it into a 1998 power strip, and wonder why the screen has a purple line in 6 months. Don't be that person. I've put together a safe path kit in the description below. These are the exact vetted sources for the M6 short bolts, the Ultra 96 HDMI cables, and the power conditioners we use in the lab. I don't care which brand of TV you buy, Sony, LG, Samsung, they all have their quirks. But if you use the right support gear, you're the one who wins. You're the one who actually gets the 10-year lifespan you paid for. Look, the 2026 market is exciting, but it's a high-stakes game. Support independent testing by hitting that subscribe button. We buy these TVs with our own money, so we can tell you the truth that the brands hide in the fine print. Check the comments for the calibration cheat sheet for each model we talked about today. I've pinned the most stable settings there so you don't have to guess.
Stay skeptical, stay smart, and don't let a day one disaster ruin your 2026 upgrade. I'm Chris Walker, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.